Welcome to the Highline Herd podcast, where we dive deep into the world of horses and the people who love them. Join us for new episodes every Sunday as we explore everything from horse care, riding tips, and anything else equestrian related. To keep up with the herd, be sure to follow us on Instagram at the Highline Herd and visit our website at thehighlineherd.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Highline Herd. I'm Skylar.
I'm Shelby.
And if you can't tell already, there's going to be a lot of background sounds. It's going to be a little bit strange. It's going to be a little bit different than what you might be normally used to. That is because we are outside camping. We are sitting at our campsite next to the fire, which is very pitiful, honestly. It's just the wood's a little damp and it didn't want to take, so ignore that. But today we're going to be talking about what it's like going from wintertime to springtime and all the preparation that goes into horse ownership and everything else.
So yeah, our current setting is actually kind of appropriate for that. We've got the fire next to us. We've got our dogs in the background, so you might hear them rustling in the leaves as they play a little bit.
They're a little quiet right now, so let's hope they'll stay that way.
You just jinxed it, I think.
Oh, God dang it.
So this is actually, our current setting's actually rather appropriate for talking about spring preparation.
Yeah.
We are out right now camping, practicing our fire starting skills, seeing how well the dogs do, getting our tent ready. So making sure we're ready for the spring, because we have a lot of plans to do more trail riding, packing, and camping this year. So what all do we need to do that? We need shots. We'll start with the veterinary work. So there are about 4 things that happen in the springtime that your vet typically does. It is shots and coggins, floating, sheath cleaning, or udder cleaning. Mares have udders, similar to a cow. It is where the foal drinks out of, similar to the mother's nipple. So in this episode, we might dumb down some terminology.
Or explain it further, too.
Yeah, because the springtime is when a lot of people start looking at getting lessons, looking at leasing. Some people start looking for their first horse this time of year.
Yeah.
So I know some of you might listen in and think, oh, why are you explaining this? This is obvious. Well, not to everybody, and some people are afraid to ask questions. I used to be one of those people.
Same here. Yeah.
So let's touch on shots and coggins first. So very similar to the vaccines your dog has to go through or your child has to go through, that is what a shots and coggins is. You're going to hear that term a lot in barns. So let's start with coggins, because I know sometimes when people use the term coggins, it sounds like it's its own separate set of activities. In reality, it is a viral illness very similar to human HIV in its spread and its mortality rate.
Yeah.
So why do we need a coggins?
Coggins is really important, and actually it's required if you want to travel with your horse and go over state lines.
So coggins is needed for, like Skylar said, traveling over state lines. You are absolutely allowed to be pulled over and questioned when you are hauling horses.
Yep.
You are absolutely allowed to be pulled over and questioned and asked for your horse's vaccine paperwork for proof of that negative coggins when you are going over state lines. If you are going to a campsite, even in state, they will ask to see your horse's coggins to prove that it is negative. If you are going to a show, especially a big show like Congress, they are going to require you to bring proof of negative coggins. But you also want that on hand if you're purchasing a horse. If you're bringing a horse into your barn, whether it's a new boarder or a new horse for you, you want negative coggins. You don't want to risk giving your horses something that is quite fatal and quite unpleasant.
Yeah, any time that you're going to be around new horses and your horses are going to be around different horses, it is a very, very good idea to have both your horse and the ones that they're going to be around, negative for coggins. It's just taking that extra precaution to make sure that you don't put your horse at risk for contracting the disease, because it is fatal and nobody wants that.
No, definitely not. So that's your Coggins. Let's talk about shots, and let's jump to a very similar disease to Coggins in terms of its ability, its ease of transfer, and its severity. Strangles.
Strangles is just as dangerous as Coggins. Honestly, I feel like I hear about more strangles cases than I do Coggins, just because of how quickly it spreads and how dangerous it is. I would associate strangles, or like compare it to like the chicken pox in horses, except it's more aggressive with their lymph nodes, and that's where it gets really dangerous. Strangles, you'll find that a lot at auction places, auction houses, any type of event where there's a lot of horses who might be neglected or not taken care of as much, or not up to date on their shots. So anytime that you're going to be in those places or situations, it's a good idea to just be aware and be proactive, because something about strangles is, and that's like part of why it spreads so much, is anything that disease touches, it can transfer through there. So your clothes, any type of bedding, pitchforks, buckets, all of that is a great way for the disease to just jump from horse to horse.
Definitely. And it's really, I don't understand why a strangles vaccine isn't as required as a negative Coggins,
Yeah.
especially for show horses, because you mentioned it spreads through auctions really easily where there's a lot of neglect cases, but there was an outbreak just a few years ago around here because someone took their horse to a show, and with how easy that disease transfers, all it took was that horse, touching one thing, and a whole slew of cases cropped up from that.
Yeah,
So
they had to quarantine the entire show facility. Everybody. Nobody was allowed to leave. Nobody was allowed to come in. And it was a pretty big facility. So it was a big deal in our area, at least.
It was, because, it's a brutal disease. If you have the treatment, the quarantine, not everybody has the ability. A lot of people will wind up euthanizing their horses if they test positive. So I truly don't understand why it's not required, just like Coggins is. They're both extremely fatal, extremely dangerous, extremely contagious diseases.
Yeah.
And if you're, a heavy traveler, if you even trail riding, like I know we've touched on shows, but if your horse shares another stall at a campsite or a hitching post that a horse with strangles touched, just the day before, your horse can absolutely get sick.
Yep.
If the hydrant or the hose was contaminated. So those are, like, in our opinion, your two big ones that you definitely want to make sure your vet does.
Yeah.
Even if your horse isn't a big traveler, if you go to a lot of barns, or you like going to auctions or whatever, make sure your horse is vaccinated. Better safe than sorry. So those are your, two big ones in terms of shots and Coggins. So when you hear that term, shots and Coggins, obviously, we just touched on the Coggins, but what's the shots part? The shots part is going to be your strangles vaccines, your vaccines for, say, botulism or West Nile or equine encephalitis. So, when your vet's giving out vaccines, they might ask you, do you want a 5-way, do you want a 6-way, or do you want a 7-way? Those are the three most common.
Yeah.
And each of those is a batch of vaccines. And, if you're not sure which one to give your horse, consult your vet. Because your vet is going to be most familiar with what's going on in your area, what your horses are going to be most exposed to, most at risk for.
Yeah.
And, they're also going to be more familiar with any recent cases. If there is an increase of strangles, if there is an increase of West Nile, if there is an increase of Lyme disease or botulism, they'll be able to tell you and say, hey, vaccinate your horse for this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vaccines my vet doesn't recommend because we don't live in an area where it's a major concern. Botulism is one of those. My vet doesn't use that vaccine very often. She said unless your horse is regularly eating out of round bales and is at risk of consuming, rotted hay, moldy hay, ruined hay, or, bad feed, you don't really need to worry about botulism. So it's not a vaccine I give my guys. My guys just get the basic 5-way.
Yeah. Now, as far as me, so we actually have the same vet, which is nice. We love her. She's awesome. I go the extra mile with ours. So I think this last year we ended up going through a different vet just because we were not able to get her out in time for a camping trip that Shelby and I had planned. So that was partly on, my fault. But this year, I'm going to go the extra mile. There's the doggies in the background. She's so needy. I'm going to go the extra mile, and I'm going to probably get the 6 or 7-way, just because it doesn't hurt, It's just taking that extra precaution just for my guys, because they are, like you said, they're eating, round bales all the time in their pasture, and we just got a new batch of hay, and one of those bales in there looks pretty wet, maybe a little bit moldy. I'm going to have to just take it apart and double check. But it's just one of those things that, because my guys are out in the pasture nonstop eating that hay, and it does get rained on, it does, stay in the elements, I want to just be prepared and take that precaution.
Well, and age also plays a factor. So, my guys are all towards the younger end of the spectrum. Early teens, early teens is both of them, I guess, now. Valor's 11 now, I think.
That's crazy.
I know. So it's also age. Your two guys are both, I know Chance is mid to upper teens, and Willie's possibly in his mid-20s.
Yeah. So Chance, I think he's maybe hitting 18 this year. Willie, I think he's in his early 20s, just because of his body shape and how he is aging a little bit more. You can see a lot more of the white hairs, and his face shape is changing as well. Yeah. So for my guys, I want to be, better safe than sorry, because they are up there.
Well, and, say we travel as much as we want to this year, that extra mile is going to help too, because when you travel to other states, there's other things to worry about.
Yep.
Other states have, higher humidity percentages, which brings forth a whole new slew of problems. Some states get more mosquitoes, which increases the chances of things like West Nile. So, when you're talking about shots and coggins and you hear that term, absolutely consult your vet on what they think is best, but also trust yourself. If you know you're going to be doing more, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yep.
So, go the extra mile for your horse. I know, when you're looking at that bill in the springtime, you're sitting there thinking, oh God, you're thinking about just those triple digits. Sometimes I know in some areas the vets get all the way up into the thousands even just for the spring.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you right now that budgeting for that is going to save you a lot in the long run.
Yep.
So that's your shots and coggins. That covers that. So let's go into the next part that your vet does. Floating.
Sorry, smoke just went in my face. Floating is...
Okay.
So because you can't see, the smoke just went right in my eyes and right in my face and would not leave. But floating is also very important because, actually I think I'm going to have to get all my guys floated, I know Chance has really sharp teeth on the side, and I think Willie is starting to get a sore up on his top part of his mouth. So what floating is it's basically the filing down of the horse's teeth, or just kind of overall, if you were to go to the dentist, it's a checkup. It's to make sure everything's nice and even when you chew, when the horses chew, there's not any bumps or sharp points in the teeth that could cause sores in their mouth, that could cause biting the inside of their cheek, and can also affect where their bit sits and that pain level too, of like anytime the bit hits that, sharp part, it's gonna hurt. So floating teeth just kind of takes care of that and makes sure that your horse, their mouth is okay.
The other thing floating does too is, like Skylar said, it's a veterinary dental checkup. You can pay an equine dentist if there's one in your area, or a lot of vets do it. Our vet does our floating for us.
Yep.
It is a dental checkup for your horse. Like Skylar said, make sure there's no sharp points, no sores, no issues being caused. But the other thing floating does, and this is more for young horses, is it helps identify something called wolf teeth, which is very, very similar to human wisdom teeth. These teeth can either erupt and then they need to be removed, or they stay hidden and cause sensitivity and pain,
Yes.
just like our wisdom teeth. So those wolf teeth, if your horse is going to wear a bit, those teeth have to come out because the bit will hit them and it will cause pain and discomfort. So if your horse is young, but there's nothing that you can visibly see, and they will not take a bit, they will constantly throw their head, throw a fit, do everything they can to avoid the bit or any kind of contact on the bit, it would be worth getting your vet out to check and make sure there's no teeth issues. So that is, kind of those are your big things in the spring, is make sure your vet, you get your shots and Coggins, you get their teeth floated, you get all of that checked. Now, another thing I said your vet could do is sheath cleaning / udder cleaning, which your vet can do it, or if you've got a nice horse, you can do it yourself. And by nice horse, I mean one that's easygoing and doesn't care about you getting in their business.
Yeah. And sometimes, too, your vet, in order to float their teeth, will have to sedate them, just because it is a little bit of a scary procedure for horses, and you never know how they're going to react. So it's better to have them mellowed out and not as worried about what's happening. Sometimes that makes them, relax quite a bit, and sheath cleaning becomes very easy to do, udder cleaning becomes very easy to do, and it's kind of a good thing to just combine.
So when we say sheath cleaning and your horses relax, so on a gelding, you might notice, unlike a human man, a gelding or a stallion, their penis is not on display all of the time.
No.
So much like a dog, when a male horse is not interested in something or he's not relaxed, his penis is going to be in that sheath. So as a result, that sheath can build up something called smegma. They can get something called beans, which is just a buildup of grime, dead skin, all of this nasty crud. So your vet, or you, has to either get that gelding to relax and drop so you can properly clean it, or you physically stick your hand in their sheath and pull all of that out, clean it out really well, rinse it, all of that. Now, it is recommended you use gloves and maybe a rag or, a cotton wad, because it does not smell great. It is nasty. But it is a crucial part of caring for a gelding, because there are so many problems that can arise from not having their sheaths cleaned.
Yeah. Or, you could do what I do sometimes, and I make somebody else do it.
Well, that's what we mean by saying the vet. When your vet's already got them nice and relaxed for the floating, because our vet uses drill to file their teeth, so a lot of horses don't like that noise, and they have to hold their mouths open. So sedation helps. I have my vet do the sheath cleaning for a couple of reasons. So one, I'm not comfortable doing it. I'm not going to lie. I find it gross. If I had to, I absolutely would. But, we want to be transparent here. We don't want to act like we're perfect know-it-alls. And admittedly, I find sheath cleaning disgusting. I have no desire to do it myself. So, if my vet's already out and they're already sedated, it takes her all of 2 minutes to do it. I see no issue with her doing it, but then she can also alert me if there's any issues.
Yeah.
Because gray horses are super, super prone to something called melanoma, a skin cancer. And in horses, it's not like people. In people, it is an immediate, death sentence, get treatment, blah, blah, blah. In horses, it is not. So,
I will say, for me, yes, I find it gross as well. But I have also done plenty of sheath cleaning in my days. All the barns that I worked for in the past, they all delegated, like my coworkers delegated that job to me. So I had 20 horses that I had to do it for, in a span of 2 days. And I've done it enough, and it's much easier to have my vet do it as well.
So with geldings, sheath cleaning is crucial. It leads to a lot of problems, a lot of discomfort. Some of them actually can't urinate if you don't clean their sheath.
Yeah.
So if you notice your gelding's not peeing very much, or he's not dropping a lot, he might have some issues. Now, not all geldings are show-offs. Mine don't mind hanging their dingling out quite a bit. Especially Valor, he quite enjoys when I have to groom his belly and get down there and clean it all out. So, if I stick the hose in there, he's thrilled. It's a little disturbing, I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, that just goes to show that every horse is different. Because Willie, he is not a fan. He doesn't want you to go anywhere near there. Chance is kind of the same way. He'll just pin his ears and kind of lift his back leg. He won't do anything, but he lets
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's your sheath cleaning, but udder cleaning typically is done by the owners. It's not as, I don't want to say invasive, but it's not as involved. It's very similar to you cleaning, a human female cleaning her breasts or her parts. There's not a whole lot of fishing you have to do.
Yeah.
You can just kind of wipe it all down really good, sponge it all off. So udder cleaning doesn't typically need to be done by your vet unless your mare is absolutely not, don't touch me there, go away.
Yeah. Or if there's something wrong where the udder might be sensitive or, she might be nursing.
But that's a great reason to have, listed in the spring preparation. Because, if you don't clean their udders, if you don't clean their sheaths, it can lead to a lot of issues.
Yep.
If you aren't regularly checking it, they can get diseases down there. They can get infections just like we do.
Mm-hmm.
So that is all the stuff, horse care-wise, veterinary care-wise you want to go over. Shots and coggins, floating, cleaning of the sheath and udder. And again, I know some of this might seem really basic to some of you, but this is the time of year a lot of new people start getting into horses because it's getting nicer. It's easier to be outside. So, we want to make sure everybody understands what we're saying. So, we talked about veterinary care. Let's talk about getting these guys into shape.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest things. I know, personally, I have a lot of work to do to get Willie back into shape. So for him, over the winter, because I let him rest, he was also, had a couple of injuries due to poor saddle fit, where his top line reduced quite a bit. And when I say top line, before Shelby interrupts and asks me what that is, the top line is basically the start point from his withers all the way down, the muscles down his back, up into his butt. And over time, with age, their top line can deteriorate. If they're not being exercised or worked properly, that top line can kind of decrease, which means that the saddle will hit more on their ribs and the bones and their spines, which is the issue that I'm facing with poor Willie. And in order to fix this, it's just a lot of groundwork. It's a lot of walking him up and down hills, strengthening his leg muscles, making him back up quite a bit, stepping over ground poles, stepping over logs, anything to kind of get him to engage his core and his muscles and work a little bit more instead of just walking around in a pasture all day. But it's very crucial to know your horse's build and their muscles and know what needs strengthened, what needs worked on, and maybe what needs, just it's fine as it is.
Definitely. And, if you are a heavy trail rider, you want to make sure your horse is in shape for those trails.
Yes.
One of the things, too, I know has changed for you and Willie is you guys aren't at Hocking Hills anymore. You aren't hitting those hard hills and steep switchbacks and all of that every day anymore.
Yep.
So that's definitely affected both of you.
Yeah.
So, our goal this year is to get back into trail riding just as heavily, just as difficult trails, if not more difficult. So both of us have a lot of work to do, building our horses' top line, building their shoulder muscles, their butt muscles, their core, all of it. Getting them back into shape, making sure their equipment fits properly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're going into spring preparations, you have your vet come out and do all the stuff. You're trying to look at your horse and see what they need to do to get back into shape. Groundwork, hills, logs, poles, pick up their feet, back them up, make them engage every part of their body and their brain. But you're also going to want to make sure your equipment's good to go.
Yes.
You want to make sure your saddle still fits you and your horse. Your stirrup leathers are still in good shape. Nothing's rotted or wearing down. Make sure your latigos, your billets, all of that are still properly affixed in your saddle.
Yep. Yeah, no, your tack is just as vital as your horse, because if something malfunctions or something breaks due to not cleaning it or not caring for it, that's never a good situation to be in, especially if you are on the trail or you are riding or, showing. So it's very important to keep it clean. I know sometimes I struggle with the constant cleaning of my saddle and tack. It's something that I'm trying to do better on. But in the meantime, it's very good to keep in mind, oh, hey, I haven't cleaned my tack in a hot minute. I should do that. I should do an overall check on my equipment. Make sure everything fits right, everything's good to go. It's just part of owning horses. Because sometimes this equipment is kind of expensive. And you don't want to be replacing it or damaging it or, letting it just get to the point where it's falling apart.
That's also another thing you might want to consider. So, sometimes, and I've seen it happen before, equipment can fail even though you've done all the preparation work. Yeah. So something you might want to consider in the springtime as you're getting your horse back into shape and checking your equipment, make sure your horse is prepared for an equipment failure. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure your horse isn't going to freak out because the saddle's hanging around his neck or it's on his belly.
Yeah.
I know a kid, it wasn't her fault at all. It was absolutely on the trainer. The trainer had swapped this kid's off billets so that they would fit better instead of changing out the girth, which is absolutely an option. You gotta do what you gotta do to make things fit properly.
Yeah.
But the trainer didn't check this off billet before she put it on. And it broke, and the kid, mid-run, she was doing a competition, pole weaving. So her horse was at a dead canter for this particular competition, and that billet broke, and the saddle's hanging on the horse by just the breast collar, and that horse just came right down to a walk and a dead stop by the time the kid came off. Those are the kinds of things you want to mimic as best you can to make sure you and your horse know what to do in that situation.
Yeah.
To make sure nobody panics.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about spring preparations. We're talking about, getting your horse squared away, getting them checked out by the vet, getting, them back into shape, making sure all of their equipment works. But are you ready?
That's what I was about to say, too. You got to also get yourself back into shape. No matter what type of riding you're doing, whether it be trailing or trail riding or, competitions, you want to make sure you're in tip-top shape and your muscles are ready for it. Because, I can say this from experience, not riding for X amount of time and then jumping back in the saddle and you're like, ooh, ow, okay, muscles are sore today. So you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that you're properly getting the exercise that you need. And I know I struggle with that. It's just something that, you got to think about as well. Because when you're riding, when you're on the top of a horse, you're engaging a lot of muscles that, you don't use in your everyday life. And a lot of people don't realize that too. A lot of non-horse people don't realize the amount of work and calories that you burn riding horses.
So I actually saw something the other day. So I spend a lot of my time, trying to gather more knowledge from other horse people, from the internet, from other people's mistakes or successes. And, so I'm always, trying to find little tidbits and fun facts. And something I actually saw I think I just saw it today, actually. So in our past, blanketing episode, Skylar mentioned that you burn quite a few calories while shivering. Well, I just read, a posting trot, which is when you stand and sit in rhythm with the horse's movement at the trot, which is the second gait, and it is a 2-beat gait. At that gait, you are burning just as many calories as if you were jogging. So, you want to make sure your core, your back, your thighs, your hips, everything is ready to engage in that kind of activity, because if it's not, you're doing not only yourself a disservice, but your horse.
Yeah.
And, we're not here to shame anybody, but your horse can't be an athlete if you aren't yourself to a degree an athlete.
Yeah.
And we're not out here saying, run 5 miles, but we're saying, be able to balance yourself, be able to move with your horse, and be able to be in shape to ride your horse's movements. I just had a lesson the other day with my guy, and he's got a big draft trot. So what that means is it's bouncy. He pushes you out of the saddle with every stride. The instructor I was working with, she made me sit for that entire lesson. She's like, if he's trotting, you're sitting. You're not going to post it. And I realized how out of shape I was, which does him a disservice if I'm not able to control my body. Because if I'm not able to control my body, I can't move with him.
Yeah.
So I realized, I have a lot of work to do, re-strengthening my legs, my core, my back, to ride him to the best of both of our abilities. So spring preparation isn't just about your horse, it's about you as well. And, being able to do the best you can for yourself and your horse. Because if you want to do a lot of trail riding and a lot of packing, you want to make sure you're in shape, because, what a lot of people don't say is there's a lot of trail rides where you might be walking for half of it.
Yeah.
I've been on a couple of trail rides where I've had to get on and off and on and off and on and off because the terrain, the trees just didn't allow me to ride the entire trail.
Yeah.
Are you fit enough to get on and off your horse like that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you fit enough to walk miles if you need to? Because, say your horse gets an injury. Are you able to walk back to the trailer?
Yeah.
So,
or if you fall off your horse and your horse is gone, you gotta be able to get back too.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of considerations, not just for the horse, but for you. And, let's say you're new to horses. There's a lot of stuff you need to start doing. If you want to start taking lessons and leasing, all of this we'll cover in another episode, but you got to think about what's going to be required of you outside of money and time.
Yeah.
When you're getting into horses. So, that's kind of what we wanted to touch on in this episode, is just make everyone aware just how much preparation goes into owning horses and going into the busiest time of year for horses. Springtime is when everybody starts gearing up. Everyone starts getting their gear together, their horses ready, their trailers in shape. Everyone starts getting ready to start trail riding and taking lessons again, and just all of the things are going to pick back up because, in our area, riding year-round isn't a viable option for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, in this episode, we really wanted to just touch on, what all you guys need to think about getting ready for springtime, getting ready for summer. Because I know the moment that nice weather hits, people are going to want to be out riding for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, sometimes all day.
Yeah.
And I know me and Skylar want to take weekend trips.
Oh, yeah.
Where we're going to be putting in a minimum of 6 hours on the trail. So, when you're thinking about what you want to do for the year, when you're setting your goals and your plans and your budget, then you got to think about, all the stuff we said. You got to think about your vet work. You got to think about your horse's upkeep. You got to think about getting them and yourself into shape.
Yeah. Yeah, that pretty much sums up everything. It's just stuff that you got to keep in mind. You got to just be proactive about making sure you're set, your horse is set, your equipment is set. And aside from that, then you get to do the fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. There's no fun without work.
No.
And
exactly.
A lot of horses is work. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy and that it's not work. It is.
It is a lot of work.
It is grueling. I know, because of the choices I've made, I know for a fact my knee is not going to hold out for much longer. I maybe have, as long as nothing happens, 10 years without needing some kind of corrective surgery to my knee and my hip.
Mm-hmm.
So, horses is hard on the body. It's hard on the mind. And, they're hard on themselves. So we gotta do what we can. And all these spring preparations pay forward.
Yep, exactly. Well, we thank you for joining us at our campsite tonight, and we look forward to our next episode. So until then, take care, enjoy the spring prep.
We hope you enjoyed this week's topic. Join us for new episodes every Sunday. And to keep up with the herd, be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Highline Herd and visit our website at thehighlineherd.com. We hope you enjoy the show. See you next week.